With a review underway, the Swedish manufacturer of the Gripen jets is waiting in the wings.
I am wholeheartedly in favor of this. I have not been a proponent of the F-35 for Canada. It is so limited in terms of what Canada needs for long range, long sustainment, ease of operation, that the F-35 is simply out on the logistic and operational terms.
Canada just pulled off something no U.S. ally has ever dared to do to Donald Trump, and the impact is rippling across Washington. In a direct challenge to decades of American defense dominance, Ottawa is openly considering scrapping the U.S.-made F-35 and replacing it with Sweden's Gripen fighter jet. This is not a simple procurement story. It is a declaration of independence. It is Canada telling Trump's America, we decide our defense, not you. And for a president who has built his entire foreign policy playbook on forcing allies to buy American weapons, the symbolism could not be louder.
It's important for Canada to have sovereign capability in Canada to do their own upgrades, to build parts of it, to do final assembly and tests. We, as Saab, we are prepared to do that technology transfer to Canada and support that build-up.
The shift began quietly, but the facts are now unmistakable. Canada had committed to purchasing 16 F-35s with the option to expand to 88, a massive contract that aligned Canada squarely with the U.S. defense industry. But as a review moves forward, prominent Canadian defense analysts have declared the F-35 a mismatch for Canada's vast geography and Arctic missions. According to retired naval officer Ken Hansen, the American jet simply lacks the range, the endurance, and the practicality needed to patrol one of the largest airspaces in the world. And then came the news that has completely changed the conversation. Saab, the Swedish manufacturer of the Gripen, confirmed it has offered Canada something the United States never has: full technology transfer, domestic assembly, and complete sovereign control over upgrades and maintenance. Saab CEO Michael Johansson didn't shy away from specifics. He revealed that Canada could build major portions of the Gripen on its own soil. He pointed to IMP Aerospace in Nova Scotia as a potential assembly hub. He noted that Rolls-Royce, which supplies the new engine, is based in Montreal, and he stated plainly that the offer could generate as many as 10,000 high-skilled Canadian jobs. Suddenly, this is no longer just about replacing aircraft. It is about building a Canadian aerospace base powerful enough to serve global markets. Saab even confirmed that Gripen orders from other countries could be filled in Canada, meaning Canada would not only be manufacturing jets for itself, but potentially exporting them as well. With Sweden's King and Queen scheduled to visit Canada next week and Saab's leadership joining them, the political timing is impossible to ignore. This is becoming one of the biggest defense decisions Canada has faced in a generation. To understand why this move is so explosive, you have to place it inside the real-time political backdrop. Donald Trump is now deep into his second term as president. His administration continues to demand that allies prioritize American weapons above all else, claiming that U.S. hardware is the backbone of Western security. But Trump has also turned U.S.-Canada relations into a series of pressure campaigns. From tariffs on steel and automobiles to public comments about turning Canada into the 51st state to repeated threats against Canadian exporters, Trump's approach has strained the relationship to its core. Reuters recently reported that U.S.-Canada talks stalled again because Washington pushed for concessions Ottawa couldn't accept. So when Canada publicly questions the value of the F-35, the aircraft Trump uses as a symbol of American military dominance, it becomes more than a procurement debate. It becomes a political line drawn across the continent. It says Canada no longer feels obligated to satisfy Washington's expectations, and that alone is enough to send shockwaves through Trump's inner circle. The F-35 isn't just a jet. It is the United States' most powerful geopolitical anchor. Countries that buy it depend on American maintenance hubs, American software systems, American spare parts supply chains, and American political approval for every upgrade they make. Gripen is the exact opposite. It is built for countries that want autonomy. It is designed for rugged, remote air bases. It requires simpler logistics. It can be serviced domestically without waiting on U.S. approval. And Sweden is offering Canada the one thing the United States has never put on the table: full control over the aircraft's technology. For Canada, a country responsible for defending the Arctic, the North Atlantic approaches, and long-range sovereignty missions, the Gripen simply fits better. And Trump knows that if Canada breaks from the U.S. defense ecosystem, other allies may follow. That is why this decision is so politically sensitive. It chips away at Washington's long-standing monopoly over Western air power.
While American commentators will focus on geopolitics, the heart of this story lies in Canada's industrial future. If Ottawa greenlights Gripen production, this becomes one of the biggest job-creating aerospace expansions in modern Canadian history. Nova Scotia would become a manufacturing and assembly hub. Montreal would become a high-tech engine and systems center. And Canada would step onto the global stage not just as a buyer of advanced aircraft, but as a producer and exporter of them. This perfectly aligns with Prime Minister Mark Carney's emphasis on rebuilding Canada's long-term industrial capacity. Reuters has repeatedly described his economic strategy as a generational investment plan, one that strengthens key industries and reduces dependence on volatile U.S. policy swings. In that context, Gripen is not merely a jet. It is a blueprint for Canadian sovereignty, economic, technological, and strategic.
Sweden's timing is striking. As a new NATO member, Stockholm is choosing this moment, under Trump's unpredictable second term, to tighten bonds with Canada. The fact that the King and Queen are traveling to Canada alongside Saab's leadership signals a deeper diplomatic calculation. This isn't just about sales. It is about aligning with a stable, reliable partner in North America. It is about diversifying NATO's industrial base beyond the United States, and it is about giving Canada the chance to become the only Gripen production hub outside Scandinavia, a distinction with massive geopolitical implications.
Canada is now standing at a historic crossroads. The decision between the F-35 and the Gripen is no longer just about performance specs or budgets. It is about choosing whether Canada will continue renting its security from Washington or whether it will build its own sovereign aviation future. If Ottawa chooses Gripen, Donald Trump will not just lose a customer. He will lose a symbol of American dominance. And the world will see something new. A Canada confident enough to chart its own course, powerful enough to build its own fighter jets, and independent enough to say no, even to the President of the United States. The only question left is whether Canada will take the leap, because if it does, the aviation map of North America may never look the same again.
And while Carney says he will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping this week, U.S. President Donald Trump says he won't meet with Carney for a long time and is now hitting Canada with more tariffs.
Donald Trump says he doesn't want to see you at all at APEC. Has the Canadian government given any consideration to the possibility that he doesn't want to negotiate? And do you have a contingency plan for that?
We have lots of, yes. The short answer is yes.
When Trump slammed the door, Carney found another one wide open, and this time it leads straight to Beijing. At the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Busan, South Korea, the world expected another chapter in the U.S.-Canada tariff standoff. Instead, it got a plot twist. Donald Trump said he wouldn't meet Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister he once praised as a smart negotiator. But while Trump was busy taking it personally, Carney was busy taking it globally.
This year's APEC meeting was supposed to be Trump's moment to reaffirm U.S. dominance in the Pacific. Instead, the spotlight shifted. On one side stood Trump, declaring he didn't want to see Carney for a while. On the other, Carney confirmed he would meet Xi Jinping. The irony is impossible to ignore. A U.S. president who built his brand on making deals is now boycotting one, while Canada, the neighbor he's punishing, steps into a room with the world's second largest economy. The refusal wasn't just diplomatic drama. It was a signal to the world that America's trade posture had become unpredictable. And in trade, unpredictability is weakness.
Carney's response was quiet but strategic. He didn't scold, threaten, or tweet. He moved forward. While Trump's words shut down negotiations, Carney's schedule opened new ones with Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. In Kuala Lumpur, he announced plans to increase Canada's non-U.S. exports by 50% within a decade, about $300 billion in new trade. That's not a headline about revenge. It's a blueprint for independence. The plan builds on agreements already advancing with ASEAN and Japan, while preparing new ones with China. Trump wanted to isolate Canada. What he actually did was isolate himself. Every time Washington lashes out, Ottawa gains another incentive to diversify.
Trump's decision to pile another 10% tariff on Canadian goods came days before APEC. He called it punishment for an Ontario government TV ad mocking his tariffs. It sounded impulsive, and it was. Even U.S. officials couldn't say when the new tariff would take effect or which sectors it would hit. That uncertainty created a vacuum, and Xi Jinping knows how to fill vacuums. While Trump's team was still deciding where to aim his new tariffs, Chinese officials were already preparing their talking points for Carney's meeting. For Xi, Trump's volatility is free advertising. The message to middle powers like Canada is clear. China can be a stable partner when Washington can't. In global trade, reliability is currency, and Beijing been saving every coin.
Each outburst from Washington erodes America's leverage. For decades, the U.S. used consistency as its greatest strength. Allies trusted the rules, rivals respected them. That foundation is cracking. When a U.S. president cancels trade talks over a provincial TV ad, every partner starts asking the same question. If it's this hard for Canada, what chance does anyone else have? At the same moment Trump was escalating tariffs, the IMF warned that prolonged protectionism could cut global growth by 0.5 percentage point this year. The message wasn't directed only at Beijing, it was a caution to Washington itself. Volatility carries a price tag. Canada sees that clearly. Its pitch to Asia now rests on one line: we don't weaponize trade. For investors and governments tired of U.S. unpredictability, that's becoming a powerful slogan.
The difference between Trump and Carney isn't just policy, it's temperament. Trump governs through shock, tweets, and outrage. Carney governs through process, patience, and partnerships. In Busan, one man canceled a meeting over a political insult. The other lined up 4 new bilateral sessions in 3 days. Trump called for more tariffs. Carney called for more exports. Trump framed allies as enemies. Carney treated rivals as opportunities. That contrast is changing perceptions. To American voters, Trump's defiance looks like strength, but to international markets, it looks like instability. The dollar may still dominate global trade, but the trust that sustains it is eroding. Each time the White House lashes out, that erosion deepens. Carney, by comparison, has turned calmness into strategy. His build-at-home policy, investing hundreds of billions of dollars in domestic industries while expanding overseas partnerships, signals a balanced approach that many in Asia find appealing. It's pragmatic, not performative. While Trump argues over ads, Xi arrives with talking points about supply chains and energy security. China isn't offering friendship, it's offering deals. And that's exactly what countries like Canada, Malaysia, and Japan are looking for. In the past 6 months, China has signed new energy and minerals agreements with South Korea, Pakistan, and several ASEAN members. Now, Canada could join that list. Trump's tariffs, meant to pressure Ottawa, are instead pushing it closer to Beijing, a strategic irony with long-term consequences. For Xi, it's simple math. Every U.S. misstep in the Pacific widens China's path to influence. At Busan, he doesn't need to confront Trump directly. He just needs to watch the U.S. push its allies away. The image from Busan tells the story. Trump, the man who once branded himself as the deal-maker, refuses to meet an ally. Carney, the central banker turned statesman, sits down with Xi to discuss trade and stability. The American president, frustrated by an ad, becomes a symbol of volatility. The Canadian Prime Minister, calm under pressure, becomes a symbol of adaptation. Trump's policies were meant to bring manufacturing home and force allies to fall in line. Instead, they're accelerating a realignment where America is no longer the center of gravity. The tariff wars, the canceled talks, the personal grudges, all of it has opened a gap others are eager to fill. When Trump slammed the door, Carney didn't argue. He found another door and walked right through it. Now that path leads to Beijing, to ASEAN, and to a future where Canada's trade map looks very different from the one drawn in Washington. And if that happens, it won't be because Canada betrayed the United States, it will be because the United States betrayed its own stability.
71% of Canadian consumers say they intend to buy fewer American products this year.
Canada is a very tough country to deal with.
It's got some staying power. When Trump calls us the 51st state as a deliberate insult, it is amplified on social media. And so he's actually keeping it top of mind. He's keeping the boycott going.
It began with a remark that shook Canadians. In February, President Trump triggered a trade war and suggested Canada might be America's 51st state. What could have been dismissed as political theater struck a nerve. By spring, surveys showed 71% of Canadians plan to reduce purchases of American goods in 2025. Economists cited by CNBC warned the boycott could slice 0.3% from U.S. GDP this year, about $90 billion in lost output. Walking into grocery stores in Ontario or Quebec, the shift is plain to see. Where displays once overflowed with U.S. corn and berries, shelves now carry Canadian flags and Made in Canada labels. What began as consumer frustration has turned into a movement of economic nationalism. The message is simple. If there is a Canadian choice, that is the choice people will make. The pressure is most obvious in food and drink. At Vince's Market, a Toronto-based chain serving 30,000 weekly customers, managers said that during Canada's off-season, they once relied on American produce for up to 70% of their stock. Today, that share has dropped to about 30%. Apps like MapleScan help shoppers verify origin and encourage them to favor local substitutes. Losses are clear in agriculture and beverages. Canada was the United States' second-largest food export market in 2024, worth $28.4 billion. California wines once filled 30 to 40% of red wine sales in Canadian shops. That revenue, about $60,000 a week for some stores, has evaporated. Provinces imposed a 25% tariff on U.S. alcohol this March, and bottles vanished from shelves. Imports of distilled spirits from the U.S., valued at $221 million in 2024, are being replaced by supplies from France, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. American farmers and vintners who depended on cross-border sales are watching demand collapse. The boycott is not confined to products. Travel has become another front. In 2024, 20 million Canadians visited the United States and spent $20.5 billion. This year, the flow is shrinking rapidly. Online searches for U.S. trips from Canada dropped 50% in the spring. Land crossings in March were down almost 30% year-over-year, while air travel fell 22% in June, according to CBC. For border economies, this is a crisis. Restaurants, retail outlets, and hotels in Windsor and Detroit, or Buffalo and New York State, report vanishing traffic. The U.S. Travel Association estimated America is on track to lose $12.5 billion in international visitor spending in 2025 compared with last year. Local businesses describe empty parking lots and declining revenues with no clear path to recovery.
The White House insists tariffs are making America stronger, yet for U.S. companies watching their Canadian sales disappear, the picture looks very different. While Japan and the European Union have signed new tariff frameworks and South Korea remains in talks, Canada is drifting further away. Instead of cooling tensions, Trump's rhetoric often reignites them. By repeating provocative statements and doubling down on trade barriers, he has helped keep the boycott alive. The result is a cycle of loss. American producers are squeezed, border towns are weakened, and international travelers are looking elsewhere. Even in Europe, early signs show consumers turning away from U.S. brands, suggesting the damage is not limited to North America. For Canadians, the Buy Canadian movement has become a unifying act of resistance. For Americans, it is a warning that tariffs and insults can cost dearly in jobs, sales, and reputation. Trump promised to put America first. The irony is that his approach has left America losing ground in its closest and most reliable market. The boycott that started in Canada is proving durable, and the costs are mounting day by day.